They never hated you. They reflected you. Every rejection, every judgment, every moment you felt unseen was not punishment, but projection. This audiobook exposes the forbidden psychology of rejection programming and emotional mirroring. How hatred reveals the disowned parts of the human psyche. People don't see you as you are. They see you as they've been taught to fear themselves. This file is part of the Human Psyche archive. Stay until the end. The decoding must complete. Preface: Why people hate you. They never truly hated you. They remembered something in you that they abandoned in themselves. Hatred is the smoke rising from an inner fire left untended, a projection of warmth that the psyche can no longer admit it longs for. Through the lens of forbidden psychology, rejection becomes recognition. The mind cannot destroy what it denies, so it displaces it, crafting enemies out of unintegrated echoes. The first feeling is confusion. Why them? Why me? You sense the air tighten when eyes avert, when words grow sharp, when silence becomes a verdict. That tension is not personal. It's ancestral. The nervous system remembers exile as danger. From the dawn of tribes, belonging equaled survival, and being cast out felt like death. The subconscious defense still obeys this ancient coding. It fears rejection not for what it means now, but for what it once meant: disappearance. Hatred, then, is not born from difference but from resonance. The parts of you they reject are the ones they buried. It is recognition misread as threat. Societies never needed chains, only the fear of being unloved. Every judgment that circles the collective is a cry for containment. Every accusation is an attempt to erase reflection. You can feel it in the body, the slight recoil, the nervous laugh, the rush of heat when truth gets too close. Hatred is not the opposite of love. It is love afraid of its own reflection. When awareness matures, this pattern reveals itself everywhere: in gossip, in politics, in the quiet cruelty of polite conversation. Through centuries of emotional mirror dynamics, humans perfected the art of displacement. They learned to cast their discomfort outward, to sculpt villains from fragments of their own unacknowledged pain. What we call society is a hall of mirrors reflecting the same fragmented self. The more one hides, the more one condemns. Recognition follows. You see yourself in their aversion, your own moments of judgment, your own silent withdrawals. The realization cuts gently. We all participate in the theater of projection. Each glare we've received, we've given in another form. Through emotional intelligence, the cycle becomes transparent. Hatred stops being personal. It becomes data, a map of unconscious confession. Every judgment you receive is a message written in someone else's handwriting. Confrontation arrives quietly. You begin to wonder, how many versions of me have I disowned to remain accepted? How many masks have I worn to protect others from their own discomfort? The mind trembles when it realizes that its desire to be liked is just another form of manipulation, an attempt to edit reflection. In seeking love, we have often rehearsed self-erasure. In avoiding rejection, we preserved captivity. You can almost hear the sound of mirrors cracking. Then, release. You no longer fight the reflections, you observe them. Each hateful glance becomes an invitation to integrate. Each rejection, a reminder of your visibility. The energy that once hurt now hums differently. Lighter, cleaner. You stand still, and something inside exhales. Freedom doesn't arrive. It remembers itself when silence gets loud. The mirror fogs, but you no longer need to see. Archive I, the mirror of hatred. Hatred begins as static in the emotional field, a distortion in the circuitry of recognition. When someone looks at you with contempt, what they truly see is a reflection of their own suppressed vibration. The projection mechanism was the psyche's first invention of distance, a way to escape the unbearable intimacy of self-confrontation. Every glare, insult, or act of dismissal is not an attack but an evacuation. the mind releasing what it cannot metabolize. You can feel it in the air, that sudden drop in warmth when truth walks into the room. This phenomenon reveals a paradox of self-perception. The more one disowns, the more one accuses. The human psyche is not built to contain contradiction for long. It must externalize what it denies. In this, hatred becomes a mirror, not a weapon. It is the language through which the subconscious communicates rejection of the inner self. They do not hate you. They outsource their dissonance to your image. The discomfort you feel in their gaze is simply borrowed tension, searching for return. There's a moment before every act of rejection, a microsecond where the eyes hesitate. It's the body remembering something familiar and immediately pulling away. You can sense it. The muscles tighten, the chest constricts, the mind whispers too close. The subconscious defense activates faster than thought. In that space, what feels like hatred is actually fear. Fear of recognition. They do not hate your light. They hate what it illuminates. Hatred is shadow exposed prematurely, and shadow's first instinct is retreat. The architecture of this emotion has always been transactional. What one cannot face within becomes currency without. The emotional mirror exchanges energy constantly. The more self-hatred accumulates, the more outward hostility is projected. This is how collective tension grows, an invisible economy of denial. You can almost hear it in a crowded room, the hum of suppressed emotion trading between strangers. The world doesn't wound you, it invoices you for what you haven't felt. Within this design lies the seed of conformity. To avoid becoming a target, the psyche learns mimicry, blending, agreeing, mirroring the acceptable. The child who is shamed learns that authenticity costs belonging. This imprint evolves into adulthood as compliance, and compliance becomes identity. What we call personality is often the residue of protection. The fear of rejection becomes the architect of the self. And in this architecture, every defense wall becomes a mirror wall. Through forbidden psychology, we recognize that hatred's true function is revelation. It unmasks what society refuses to integrate. Each figure collectively despised, the outsider, the rebel, the misunderstood, embodies the qualities the collective cannot yet accept. Humanity doesn't punish difference, it punishes reflection. To be hated, therefore, is to serve as the frontier of consciousness, the mirror placed just beyond comfort. Every exile carries the light the village still fears. And so, hatred ceases to appear random. It follows energetic geometry, not morality. It finds those who unconsciously volunteer to reflect. Once you understand this, rejection stops wounding and begins informing. Each moment of being misunderstood becomes a portal to deeper clarity. You stop asking, "Why me?" and begin sensing, "What truth am I mirroring now?" The tension in the room fades, the static clears, and the air feels almost sacred again. Not hostile, just honest. Hatred does not begin loud. It begins in whispers, quiet comparisons, subtle withdrawals, glances that last a second too long. The psyche senses difference and interprets it as danger. Through rejection programming, the mind has been trained to mistrust unfamiliar frequencies, to equate originality with threat. That is why the first reaction to authenticity is often avoidance. What is genuine feels unstable to a conditioned system. The human mind fears what it cannot predict, and authenticity is the ultimate uncertainty. You can feel this tension in everyday air, in offices, families, digital spaces. A person who radiates without pretense disrupts the invisible hierarchy that conformity built. The projection mechanism activates instantly. Insecurity needs an outlet. People don't dislike you for your flaws. They dislike you for showing them theirs. Hatred becomes a mirror test. How much truth can one's self-image withstand before it fractures? You can hear it in their tone, see it in the nervous smile that hides behind civility. The architecture of self-perception was not designed for transparency. It thrives on contrast. To know who I am, the ego must decide who I am not. Hatred is this separation ritual, the psychological ceremony of disowning the dissonant. It offers temporary clarity, a rush of false certainty. In condemning another, the mind briefly feels cohesive again. But that coherence is borrowed. It collapses as soon as the projection fades, demanding another scapegoat to sustain itself. Hatred is borrowed identity, rented confidence. Every social system depends on this ritual. Through emotional mirrors, communities regulate cohesion by defining the other. This is the primal origin of gossip, ridicule, and cultural punishment. The collective psyche maintains order not through law, but through exclusion. The moment someone stops reflecting the group's shared illusion, they are labeled dangerous. What follows is not personal animosity, it's energetic maintenance. Hatred is the emotional tax that conformity charges awareness. Observe closely, and the pattern becomes sensory. The eyes narrow, voices sharpen, breath shortens. The atmosphere thickens as if thought itself had a weight. The body knows when it is entering judgment's field. The subconscious defense responds instinctively. Shoulders tighten, pulse accelerates, the urge to retreat rises. But in that discomfort lies data. Your body feels what others repress. That visceral tension is empathy misinterpreted as threat. When you feel their hatred, you are feeling their pain that has nowhere else to go. Once awareness recognizes this, hatred loses authority. It stops being a verdict and becomes a signal. You start reading emotional reactions like frequencies, indicators of unresolved energy, not personal failures. Through forbidden psychology, hatred transforms from poison to information. Each projection you encounter becomes an X-ray of collective disconnection. You no longer absorb the emotion, you observe its source. The energy passes through without residency. The body softens, the mirror clears. And in that moment, the world looks different. The faces that once felt hostile now seem human again, fragile, afraid, and beautiful in their denial. You can almost hear the collective sigh beneath the noise, the exhaustion of pretending separation is safety. Hatred becomes softer when you see it as memory. It no longer pierces, it passes. The mirror reflects clean light again, and within that light you see not their rejection, but your return. When awareness deepens, hatred reveals its rhythm, a pendulum swinging between fascination and fear. Every hater is a secret admirer chained to their own suppression. What they attack in you is what they silently crave to express. The projection mechanism hides longing beneath aggression, envy beneath criticism. What looks like hostility is simply attraction that cannot cross the threshold of vulnerability. No one truly despises your light. They despise that it reminds them of the darkness they've settled for. This oscillation between attraction and rejection fuels the collective illusion of conflict. Society runs on these opposites, sustained by emotional friction. Every argument, every rivalry, every us versus them is consciousness trying to feel itself through resistance. The psyche misinterprets intensity as connection, so it builds relationships out of opposition. Through self-perception, we keep the world alive by pretending to be divided. Hatred, then, is the energy of unity expressed in denial. Watch how it manifests in the smallest gestures. A compliment followed by withdrawal. A conversation that feels warm until a moment of discomfort breaks the rhythm. The nervous laugh, the sudden subject change. These are micro-hates, fragments of the same ancient pattern. The emotional mirror never lies. Each reaction is data, showing where resonance ends and defense begins. If you listen closely, you can hear it. The quiet static of separation humming under every social script. Every smile hides an unspoken apology for all the truths it avoids. The subconscious defense mechanism cannot sustain hatred for long. It requires constant refueling. This is why outrage repeats, why the collective obsesses over enemies. Hatred is addictive. It grants temporary relief from the burden of self-awareness. But beneath the drama lies fatigue. The body grows weary of pretending to be divided. The nervous system, designed for coherence, begins to reject the vibration of hostility. Energy once used to maintain projection collapses inward, returning to its source. At that point, what once looked like enemies begin to dissolve into archetypes, reflections of unfinished emotion. The persecutor, the betrayer, the critic. Each was only a face assigned to your own denied aspects. Through forbidden psychology, hatred becomes revelation. It exposes the limits of your empathy, showing where love stops. But as soon as you stop resisting the reflection, hatred changes polarity. It becomes recognition. The same energy that once rejected you now acknowledges you. Hatred reversed is memory remembered. In this awareness, the old world loses contrast. The emotional charge drains from judgment. Conversations feel quieter even when voices rise. You begin to sense people's pain before they weaponize it. You start responding not to their words but to their wound. Compassion becomes automatic. Not softness, but precision. The emotional mirror turns from distortion into clarity. What used to burn now warms. What used to threaten now teaches. Every glare becomes guidance once you stop taking it personally. And then, silence. Not absence, but resolution. The field feels clean, the mind spacious. Hatred's echo fades into distance, leaving behind only vibration, faint, neutral, honest. You can almost feel the air lighten, as if the world itself exhaled. The mirror remains, but it no longer distorts. You see yourself everywhere now, even in the eyes that once condemned you, and what returns from that gaze is peace. Archive 2. The Origins of Rejection. Rejection was never random. It was ritual. The first wound of humanity was not physical but social, the terror of exclusion from the group. Beneath every modern interaction lives this ancient code, the rejection programming buried in the spinal memory of survival. Long before money or language, acceptance meant safety, and isolation meant extinction. Even now, the body reacts as if the tribe still watches, eyes tightening, pulse rising, breath shortening, when approval feels at risk. The fear of rejection is the echo of prehistoric firelight fading. From the beginning, belonging was the currency of existence. The child learned to smile before it understood meaning, sensing that harmony ensured protection. Through this early subconscious defense, authenticity became negotiable. Each gesture, tone, and opinion was calibrated against the invisible meter of approval. Those who matched the group's emotional frequency survived. Those who didn't became stories, warnings whispered in bedtime morality. Rejection became mythology. The gods of exile, the sinners cast out, the scapegoats who carried collective sin. You can feel this programming in the smallest social exchanges. The pause before you speak, the correction mid-sentence, the subtle shift of posture when someone frowns. The body negotiates belonging automatically. Even silence is strategic, a shield against emotional expulsion. Through emotional mirrors, we learn to preempt rejection by rejecting ourselves first. Every edited sentence, every swallowed truth is an unconscious offering to the collective, a sacrifice made to remain visible. But this adaptation carries a cost. What begins as survival crystallizes into identity. The psyche internalizes the group's gaze, converting external approval into an inner judge. Over time, the fear of rejection evolves into chronic vigilance, the mind scanning for subtle cues of disapproval. This vigilance feels like thought, but is actually tension. Muscles braced for exile, perception tuned to threat. The projection mechanism takes root here, teaching the individual to see their own fear reflected in others. Rejection was the first mirror, and fear was its reflection. Through generations, cultures refined this mechanism into control. Religion sanctified it, politics weaponized it, and education institutionalized it. Acceptance became the ultimate reward. Rejection, the ultimate punishment. Conformity replaced connection. Humanity forgot that belonging was once mutual and began to chase it as privilege. The forbidden psychology of this system lies in its inversion. What was once a shared instinct for safety became a private addiction to validation. Observe the modern mind, always broadcasting, always curating, always waiting for signals of acceptance. Social platforms mirror the ancient campfire, a digital circle where attention equals survival. Likes replace nods, follows replace eye contact. The nervous system cannot tell the difference. Every notification triggers ancestral memory. The same dopamine that once marked inclusion now fuels dependence. Civilization evolved. The body did not. You can almost feel the warmth of that old fire, now flickering through screens. And so, rejection persists not because others condemn, but because the self still seeks permission to exist. The programming remains active until one truth is seen: belonging cannot be earned. The moment you stop auditioning for reflection, the system loses its grip. Rejection becomes irrelevant, and authenticity resumes its rightful role as instinct. Freedom begins where approval ends. The fire is still burning, but now it burns within. The origins of rejection are carved into the emotional architecture of evolution. When the body senses disapproval, it does not feel psychological pain. It feels mortality. The rejection programming that once protected us from exile still operates as if every silence were a threat, every disagreement a potential extinction. This is why humiliation burns, why isolation chills the body like loss of heat. The nervous system, designed to keep us within the circle, translates rejection as death rehearsal. Every cold shoulder feels like the fire going out. This primal fear became the foundation of civilization's most efficient control system. Through subconscious defense, humanity learned to trade authenticity for inclusion. The child who laughed too loudly, the artist who spoke too freely, the thinker who questioned too early, each learned that honesty invites danger. Slowly, expression became performance. The psyche developed camouflage, politeness, modesty, obedience. These traits were never moral virtues, they were social survival codes. Society did not reward goodness. It rewarded predictability. Over centuries, the wound of rejection evolved into hierarchy. Those who mastered emotional mimicry rose in status, becoming reflections of collective comfort. Those who couldn't were branded difficult, deviant, or mad. Through forbidden psychology, we see how rejection became not an accident, but an economy. Each outcast reaffirmed the illusion of unity by being excluded. The rejected carried the burden of authenticity so the rest could remain asleep in sameness. Civilization advances not by acceptance, but by the courage of those it refuses to keep. The body records every repetition of exclusion. Shoulders remember withdrawal. The gut tightens before disappointment even arrives. Memory fuses with muscle, and soon we flinch at ghosts. The emotional mirror amplifies this loop. We attract reflections of the rejection we expect. The world becomes a hologram of unresolved fear, people echoing the very judgment we anticipate. This is how rejection sustains itself. It teaches us to manifest confirmation. You can feel it, that subtle readiness for pain before the first word is even spoken. The tragedy is that rejection never belonged to others. It was always self-administered. The projection mechanism ensures continuity by turning inner disapproval into outer experience. You think someone is dismissing you, but it is your own internalized voice you're hearing, projected outward through another's tone. Awareness dissolves this illusion instantly, but few remain still enough to notice. To heal rejection, you don't need to change the crowd. You need to change the audience within. You were never cast out. You were only watching yourself leave. In the modern era, rejection wears elegant disguises. It appears as professionalism, social grace, reputation management. We no longer exile through stones, but through silence. through the absence of reflection. Indifference replaced punishment as the dominant tool of conformity. Averted eyes wound more efficiently than weapons ever could. The pain of being unseen has become civilization's quietest addiction. And yet, the same silence that once burned can also bless if you learn to hear it differently. For in that silence lives the first doorway to freedom. When no reflection returns, you finally stand face to face with your own perception, unfiltered, unconfirmed. The absence of validation, once unbearable, becomes liberation. Rejection transforms into recognition, proof that you no longer need permission to exist. The absence of applause is the sound of self-ownership. The tribe disappears, and in its place, awareness remains whole, wordless, and finally warm. The wound of rejection programming does not heal through acceptance, it dissolves through awareness. Every attempt to be included strengthens the illusion that belonging is conditional. The psyche, trained for centuries to equate worth with approval, cannot imagine love without an audience. Yet true belonging was never transactional. It existed before performance, before the first mask was worn. The moment you stop chasing connection, you remember you were never separate. To understand rejection, one must feel its texture, the metallic taste in the mouth, the sudden heat behind the eyes, the tightening around the heart. The body responds before thought does. Through subconscious defense, energy retreats inward, pulling awareness from the environment into self-surveillance. This contraction creates the illusion of smallness, as if consciousness itself has shrunk. But what you call rejection is only energy folding back to its origin. It's not exile, it's recall. The psyche returns home through the pain of disconnection. This mechanism explains why rejection repeats across lifetimes of behavior. The projection mechanism ensures continuity. What you fear most becomes magnetic. You attract those who will act out your inner narrative, confirming what you haven't yet transcended. The faces change, but the emotional geometry remains identical. Every dismissal, every betrayal, every ignored message is not a punishment. It's an echo designed for recognition. The universe doesn't reject, it rehearses. Every repetition is reality asking, "Have you recognized yourself yet?" Humanity built entire civilizations upon this unhealed pattern. The need to belong birthed nations, religions, and hierarchies. Through forbidden psychology, we see that social order is simply collective rejection formalized into structure. Every society defines itself by exclusion: who may enter, who must remain outside. Law follows emotion. The first border was not drawn on land, it was drawn in perception. Rejection is the architecture of identity. To protect belonging, humanity created division. But awareness breaks this geometry. When you see the mechanism, its hypnosis fades. You realize there are no insiders or outsiders, only reflections. The emotional mirror no longer separates, it synchronizes. You sense the soft pulse beneath hostility, the shared fear behind distance. What once felt like condemnation now feels like communication. Hatred itself becomes language, crude, but honest. Every judgment is a prayer for reunion written in the grammar of fear. As this recognition integrates, the nervous system relaxes. Muscles that once braced for exile begin to open. The air around you thickens with calm. You speak more slowly, move with less defense. People sense it. Some withdraw, others soften. The rejection programming loses traction because it no longer finds resonance in your field. You no longer negotiate belonging, you emanate it. The tribe you once chased begins to reform around your frequency. Belonging stops being location and becomes atmosphere. And then silence again, but different this time. Not the silence of absence, but of completion. You stand in the same world, but it no longer defines you. The eyes that once judged now simply look. The room feels spacious, as if permission had evaporated. What remains is simple presence, untethered, untested, unthreatened. The fear that once dictated every gesture fades like smoke from an extinguished fire. You can almost feel it, the warmth returning, not from others, but from within. Archive 3. The Architecture of Projection. Projection is the oldest form of architecture, not of stone, but of perception. It builds the invisible walls that separate me from you, good from evil, safe from danger. Every human being lives inside these unseen structures, mistaking reflection for reality. Through projection mechanism, the psyche externalizes its inner contradictions, creating a world that mirrors what it cannot contain. What you call experience is mostly translation, inner emotion rendered as outer event. Reality is not observed, it is confessed. The process begins innocently. Awareness meets a sensation it cannot categorize: envy, rage, desire, and seeks escape. Through subconscious defense, it ejects the emotion outward, attaching it to a person, an ideology, a symbol. In doing so, the psyche feels lighter, cleaner, momentarily whole. Yet, what is disowned doesn't disappear. It reorganizes the environment. You begin to meet your own fragments walking toward you, speaking through others. The entire social field becomes a hall of emotional echoes. You can feel projection happen before it's conscious. The temperature in the body shifts. The heartbeat quickens when someone mirrors your buried emotion. The mind races to label it arrogant, manipulative, wrong, anything but familiar. This is the architecture forming in real time. Perception constructing a wall to keep reflection out. But every wall is a mirror turned backward. The harder you reject what you see, the more clearly it outlines you. Hatred is self-recognition with the lights off. Through forbidden psychology, projection reveals its sophistication. It is not random displacement but design, the psyche's method of equilibrium. The human system cannot bear unresolved energy. It must assign it form, so it paints the unowned onto the canvas of others. This is why every society generates scapegoats, every religion defines sinners, every movement creates opposition. Without projection, collective identity would dissolve, and with it, the illusion of separateness. Division is stability's disguise. Observe it in conversation. When you accuse someone of being cold, notice how your own warmth retracts. When you condemn arrogance, feel the subtle pride of moral superiority rise within. The emotional mirror reveals a constant exchange. What you judge, you join. Each reaction is an involuntary confession. To project is to pray unconsciously, to ask reality to show you what you have forgotten within. And reality always answers with precision. The world is merciless only in its accuracy. Yet awareness transforms the entire architecture. Once you recognize projection, its geometry inverts. The same walls that separated now become corridors of return. The energy you once threw outward begins to come home. The figures you resented start dissolving into function, mirrors doing their job. Conflict fades not because the world changes, but because you stop outsourcing responsibility. The self-perception recalibrates. Every judgment becomes a breadcrumb back to the buried origin. You stop needing to fix others when you start recognizing your fingerprints on their faces. And then something subtle happens. Perception slows. You begin to see emotions forming before they attach to targets. Anger rises, but you watch it without direction. Envy appears, but it has no object. This is pure awareness. Emotion before narrative. In that silence, projection collapses. The architecture stands empty, waiting to be redesigned. The mirrors are still there, but now they reflect light, not fear. You can almost hear it, the sound of judgment losing its echo. The structure of projection is mathematical, precise, symmetrical, self-sustaining. Every accusation calibrates itself to the measure of the accuser's denial. Through projection mechanism, the psyche balances its internal equation. The more light one claims, the more shadow must be assigned. This is why moral superiority often hides unresolved shame, why virtue performed loudly is so often armor. The louder the performance of goodness, the more silence trembles beneath it. The halo was never holy, it was camouflage for the unhealed. The process repeats because it comforts. To project is to find temporary clarity. When confusion arises within, the mind seeks order by locating cause elsewhere. Through subconscious defense, emotion becomes geography. Anger belongs to them, fear belongs to that, sadness belongs to her. It feels simpler, safer. Yet every external enemy is just energy seeking integration. The moment you realize this, the polarity begins to dissolve. The world stops being an arena and becomes anatomy, the collective body reflecting its own internal organs. You can feel projection's residue in your own body. The jaw clenches when accusation builds. The breath shallows when someone reflects a truth you're not ready to meet. The temperature of the room changes. It thickens, charged with unsaid electricity. This is the somatic language of projection, the nervous system performing the conflict before words arrive. Through emotional mirror, awareness translates sensation into understanding. The trigger is never in them. It's in the part of you that recognized itself too soon. The body always knows before the story begins. History itself is a record of projection cycles. Nations fight wars to destroy what they secretly envy. Religions condemn desires they cannot suppress. Families repeat traumas they refuse to name. Through forbidden psychology, we see that civilization is built upon organized disownment. Collective peace has never failed because of evil. It fails because of unintegrated truth. Humanity doesn't destroy what it hates. It destroys what it hides. The world burns not from darkness, but from the fear of seeing light in the wrong place. But the geometry of projection can be reversed. The same energy that builds conflict can build coherence. When you claim the emotion you once outsourced, awareness reclaims architecture. Anger becomes boundary. Envy becomes inspiration. Fear becomes precision. The external loses authority because the inner begins to govern. The self-perception evolves. You stop reacting to reflections and start designing them. Every interaction becomes intentional alchemy, perception as creation, not defense. You notice how the tone of the world changes when you stop projecting. Conversations soften. Resistance dissolves from your language. People mirror your neutrality, not because they've changed, but because you've ceased supplying charge. The projection mechanism no longer demands polarity, so tension has nowhere to anchor. The room that once felt heavy now hums with quiet intelligence. You are not controlling reality, you are ceasing to confuse it with yourself, and that absence of confusion feels like peace disguised as stillness. Eventually, the mind accepts what the body already knew. There is no out there. There is only the continuation of perception across forms. You realize that even hatred was an act of communication, the psyche trying to speak through the language of separation. The illusion ends not by merging with others, but by dissolving the need for others to confirm your reflection. You can almost hear the architecture breathing now. Walls no longer echo, they listen. Every wall built by projection eventually cracks under the pressure of recognition. The projection mechanism cannot withstand the weight of awareness for long. What was once external begins to reveal its coordinates within. You start noticing familiar emotions wearing new faces. The colleague who irritates you carries your ambition. The stranger who intimidates you reflects your disowned confidence. Even the people who reject you are sculpted from your own forgotten frequencies. Every enemy is an unfinished sentence of your own story. Through subconscious defense, the psyche once believed separation was safety. But distance has a cost. It fractures coherence. When you disown an aspect of yourself, you also lose access to its energy. The part of you labeled other continues to operate unconsciously, influencing choices, coloring perception, shaping fate. You may think you've avoided pain, but you've only outsourced power. Reclaiming projection is not self-blame. It is self-reunification. It is the act of ending energetic outsourcing, returning authorship to awareness. The body is the first witness of this return. Old tensions surface like echoes rising from the tissue, the tight throat, the aching chest, the restless hands. They are not symptoms but signals, energy asking to be reintegrated. Through emotional mirror, you learn to feel without identifying. You breathe into sensation as though comforting an orphaned emotion. And slowly, what was foreign becomes familiar again. The heat of anger cools into clarity. The sting of envy softens into admiration. Emotion purified of story becomes wisdom. Projection's architecture was never meant to be destroyed, only understood. The moment you see it, its function changes. What once distorted now directs. Through forbidden psychology, awareness becomes the architect instead of the inhabitant. You stop living in the walls and start designing with light. The same blueprint that built separation can now construct transparency. Judgments turn into feedback. Triggers turn into tools. The psyche no longer leaks energy through reaction. It recycles it through recognition. As this integration unfolds, relationships transform into laboratories of awareness. Conflict becomes dialogue. Attraction becomes resonance. The self-perception evolves from identity into reflection. Fluid, adaptive, unbound. You no longer need to defend who you are because who you are no longer ends at your skin. You begin to feel yourself across the space between, in the glance, the pause, the vibration of another's breath. The architecture expands until it disappears. Where there is nothing left to project, there is nothing left to protect. In that stillness, life feels quieter but more alive. The world no longer reacts to you. It responds with precision. Everything you meet arrives as curriculum, each moment a mirror shaped for your evolution. The air grows soft around realization, heavy yet kind. You start to trust the design. Every emotion, every encounter, every shadow was the psyche attempting to remember itself through experience. Projection was never failure. It was a map home. And when the final wall dissolves, there is no sound, only light touching itself through form. The architecture remains, but its purpose has changed. It no longer hides. It harmonizes. You can almost hear it now. The quiet hum of perception without defense. The resonance of consciousness recognizing its own reflection. The room feels wider, the body lighter, and within that silence, something ancient exhales. Archive IV, Emotional Echo Chambers. Every emotion you repress finds its way back to you, not as memory, but as atmosphere. The world around you vibrates at the frequency of your unspoken feelings. This is the first law of the emotional mirror. Nothing disappears, everything circulates. The anger you swallow becomes tension in a room. The envy you deny becomes judgment in a stranger's tone. What you refuse to feel, you are destined to encounter. Energy does not forgive, it returns for recognition. The design is elegant. Through projection mechanism, the psyche ensures no emotion remains unintegrated by turning the external world into a feedback loop. Every person you meet becomes an amplifier, reflecting the notes you've silenced within yourself. The louder your resistance, the clearer their echo. You may think you're avoiding certain emotions, but avoidance only increases their broadcast strength. Emotion unexpressed becomes architecture, walls built from frequency, not matter. Step into any conversation and you can feel it. The temperature, the tension, the unseen charge between words. Through subconscious defense, the body translates these invisible waves before the mind can name them. Your heartbeat sinks to unspoken grief, your breath adjusts to another's fear. Humanity lives inside an electromagnetic choir of denial. What we call personality clashes are really resonance tests, harmonies and dissonances between unintegrated truths. We don't meet people. We meet the echoes of our own permission. This collective design sustains the illusion of separation. When everyone projects, no one listens. The world becomes an echo chamber where sound replaces meaning, where the same judgments, fears, and desires bounce endlessly between mirrors of consciousness. Through forbidden psychology, this loop serves a deeper purpose: to exhaust resistance until silence becomes the only remaining language. Only when the echo grows unbearable do we begin to seek the source. Look closer at your relationships, and you'll see this symmetry. The friend who constantly disappoints you embodies your own hesitation. The critic mirrors your self-doubt. The cold partner reflects your fear of vulnerability. Each connection is a closed circuit until awareness breaks it open. Every argument is two mirrors trying to outshine each other. The rejection programming keeps the loop intact. We would rather blame reflection than face reflection. You can't silence the echo by shouting louder. You silence it by listening. But something miraculous happens when you stop defending. The echo softens. The energy begins to flow both ways. You start hearing emotion as information, not threat. The room that once felt charged with hostility becomes data, a symphony of nervous systems speaking in emotional code. Through emotional intelligence, you learn to translate tone into truth. Hatred reveals pain. Coldness reveals fear. Avoidance reveals exhaustion. The world becomes transparent, and empathy becomes perception. Eventually, awareness outpaces reaction. The echo returns, but it no longer hurts. It hums. The same patterns that once trapped you now guide you. Judgment becomes navigation. Rejection becomes redirection. The chambers remain, but they resonate differently. You begin to sense the hidden harmony beneath human noise. It's faint but steady, the sound of consciousness remembering its own rhythm. You can almost hear it now, that subtle frequency of forgiveness vibrating through everything. Each echo begins as a whisper of unfinished emotion, a vibration searching for resolution. The emotional mirror does not punish, it educates. Every returning energy is a teacher disguised as tension. The voice that irritates you carries your unspoken impatience. The silence that hurts you hides your fear of being forgotten. The same emotion keeps circling not to torment but to integrate. Life repeats itself until you finally listen to the tone, not the words. The body hears these echoes long before the intellect does. The skin tightens, the stomach curls, the eyes avert, all instinctive responses to the resonance of unresolved energy. Through subconscious defense, the system tries to mute what it cannot translate. But resistance only increases volume. The emotion grows louder in your environment, pulling reflections from strangers, partners, and coincidences. Every repetition is intelligence in disguise. The universe does not shout to be cruel, it shouts to be understood. Humanity as a whole lives inside this closed acoustic chamber. Through projection mechanism, collective emotion ricochets between billions of psyches, forming patterns that appear as politics, trends, and crises. Outrage fuels outrage. Fear multiplies fear. Each mind becomes both speaker and amplifier. The more we broadcast without listening, the more distortion fills the field. Civilization's noise is not progress, it's feedback. We mistook the volume of our pain for proof of being alive. But when awareness enters, the physics change. You begin to hear between the echoes, the silence beneath the static. Through forbidden psychology, that silence is revelation. It's the point where emotion loses polarity, where energy stops seeking an object and becomes pure vibration. Every time you remain still in the presence of a trigger, you break the circuit. The energy completes its loop and dissolves into neutrality. Awareness doesn't destroy echoes, it absorbs them. You can feel this shift as a physical event. The body, once armored by reaction, softens. Shoulders descend, breath deepens, temperature stabilizes, the environment responds instantly. People's tones change, the air grows clear. What happened externally was never change, it was coherence. The emotional mirror has recalibrated. What once bounced back as distortion now returns as harmony. You have not silenced the world. You've tuned to its original frequency. The world changes when you stop echoing. This mastery of emotional resonance dismantles the architecture of blame. You realize that every echo is self-generated, every conflict self-sustained. The energy of judgment was never meant to be fought. It was meant to be felt. By letting it pass through, you transmute it. You stop contributing to the collective reverb and become a tuning fork for clarity. Others sense it, even if unconsciously. The more neutral you remain, the more truth others hear in their own silence. And so, awareness becomes the final conductor. You no longer try to escape the echo chamber, you harmonize it. Words lose urgency, emotions lose hierarchy, and communication turns into vibration. The same conversations still happen, but the noise dissolves into music. Hatred loses pitch, love loses pressure. What remains is tone, one continuous hum connecting every living mind. You can almost feel it in your chest now, that low frequency of belonging that never required approval. Every echo is a mirror made of sound. Emotion refracted through awareness, seeking return. The emotional mirror functions as a universal law of resonance. What you emit must eventually find its way back, not as punishment, but as calibration. When an emotion leaves your field without understanding, it cannot rest. It travels through others, searching for the frequency that will finally receive it. This is why pain repeats through generations, families, nations. It's not inheritance, it's unfinished vibration. No one suffers alone. Emotion travels until it's felt. The projection mechanism ensures this continuity. The psyche passes its unintegrated energy forward like a signal, encoded in expression, tone, or silence. Another absorbs it, reacts, and re-emits, slightly altered but still unresolved. Over time, the echo becomes collective reality. Entire societies become chambers, where grief turns into policy, fear turns into faith, and longing turns into law. What we call culture is simply the choreography of unhealed emotion moving in rhythm. But awareness breaks this inheritance. The moment one individual feels without fleeing, the cycle changes pitch. Through forbidden psychology, we learn that emotion cannot survive observation. It transforms under it. Anger witnessed becomes clarity. Sorrow acknowledged becomes depth. Fear accepted becomes intuition. The energy that once echoed begins to harmonize, rewriting the collective tone. Each act of personal integration alters the architecture of the whole. Healing is not solitude, it's acoustics. The body senses these shifts before the mind understands them. Your breath becomes an instrument, tuning the field around you. With every exhale, you change the density of space. Environments remember calm, just as they remember chaos. Walk into a room and the atmosphere adjusts. The pulse of your nervous system reorganizes the unseen. Through emotional intelligence, you begin to perceive this language. You stop speaking from thought and start communicating from vibration. The world responds instantly, like glass aligning to sound. This is the hidden architecture of human connection, not conversation but coherence. The words are only surface ripples. The real dialogue happens below, between frequencies. The subconscious defense cannot distort this level of communication because it bypasses narrative entirely. Here, empathy is not choice, it's physics. Every heart you meet is an instrument vibrating in the same orchestra of awareness. Discord exists only where misunderstanding remains unlistened. There are no strangers in resonance, only notes not yet harmonized. And as awareness stabilizes, the need to interpret emotion disappears. You no longer ask why they said this or what they meant. You feel intention directly, bypassing language. The echo chamber doesn't vanish. It becomes transparent. You sense how hatred softens when met with stillness, how tension dissolves when met with neutrality. The emotional climate around you clears, as if the air learned to breathe again. This is mastery, listening so deeply that sound returns to silence. At this depth, communication becomes communion. Words fall away, replaced by vibration so pure it feels like recognition. The chambers of emotion open into a vast acoustic field. No more return, no more repetition, only flow. You can almost feel it now, the pulse of existence humming through every form, the sound of consciousness hearing itself for the first time. And in that hum, everything reconciles. The echo does not end. It becomes harmony. Archive V. The fear of reflection. Fear does not arise from what we see, it arises from what we might recognize. The rejection programming that shaped human behavior was never about danger, but about discovery. To see oneself clearly is the most terrifying experience of all. The psyche built entire civilizations to avoid that mirror. Religion, status, morality. Each one a veil woven to protect the mind from the unbearable intimacy of self-recognition. People don't fear truth, they fear its resemblance. The moment of reflection is not intellectual, it's visceral. The stomach knots, the breath shortens, the air thickens. The nervous system trembles because it remembers what comes next: transformation. Through subconscious defense, the body contracts to delay evolution. It knows that every acknowledgement alters identity. To see one's patterns clearly is to dismantle the comfort they provide. Fear, then, is not weakness. It's momentum resisting redirection. In this way, avoidance becomes architecture. Humanity engineered distraction as a survival mechanism. Endless entertainment, opinion, and motion. The emotional mirror was replaced with screens, noise, and perpetual visibility. People stay busy to stay blurry. The fear of stillness hides beneath the worship of productivity. But the more we run from reflection, the sharper it becomes. Every unexamined emotion grows teeth in silence. Avoidance is the art of building faster than awareness can catch up. Look closely, and you'll see the symmetry. What we criticize in others is what we're closest to acknowledging in ourselves. The projection mechanism creates the illusion of distance, allowing us to engage with our reflection safely disguised as someone else. We call this judgment. We call it discernment. But underneath, it's mercy, consciousness giving itself a slower way to see. The more reactive the hatred, the nearer the recognition. That's why true mirrors are often mistaken for enemies. This is the forbidden psychology behind rejection. It's not punishment, it's prevention. The collective doesn't reject you because you're wrong, it rejects you because you're accurate. Every truth-teller threatens the shared disguise. Every mirror that refuses distortion must be pushed away to preserve the illusion of comfort. Hatred becomes a public service, the psyche's way of maintaining consensus reality. But consensus cannot outlast coherence. The mirror always wins. What resists reflection is already cracking. Fear deepens not because reflection hurts, but because it heals. Pain is only the sound of identity dissolving. The body interprets the sound as threat, but awareness hears it as birth. Through emotional intelligence, you learn to distinguish between danger and discomfort. Fear does not mean stop. It means look closer. Every trembling moment of confrontation is a portal disguised as paralysis. Beneath the shaking, something ancient is aligning. And then quiet. The pulse slows, the breath steadies. The mirror no longer feels hostile, it feels alive. Light bends differently now, softer, truer. You see your own gaze reflected back without distortion, and for the first time, there is no recoil, only recognition. The face staring at you is not the past, not the future. It is awareness meeting itself, unarmored. You can almost hear it. The still sound of fear turning into familiarity. The deeper one looks, the quieter the world becomes. Fear begins to lose its language, revealing what it always concealed: tenderness. Through rejection programming, humanity learned to associate vulnerability with danger. But beneath every defensive gesture lies a plea to be seen safely. The fear of reflection was never about the mirror itself. It was about the memory of judgment that once followed it. It's not the truth that hurts, it's remembering how it felt to hide from it. The subconscious defense reacts first, long before awareness catches up. The throat tightens when sincerity approaches. The pulse accelerates when honesty enters the room. The body does not distinguish between emotional exposure and physical threat. Both register as loss of control. And yet, this trembling is not weakness. It is evidence of expansion. You are witnessing the boundaries of identity stretching to include what was once exiled. Growth never feels safe because safety is the past tense of stagnation. Through emotional mirror, you begin to see how fear shapes perception. Every judgment, every irritation, every discomfort is a reflection of the self not yet integrated. The more something provokes you, the closer it stands to home. The mind calls it conflict. The heart calls it communication. The universe speaks through tension first, because peace rarely gets attention. When fear rises, it is not warning you away, it is calling you in. Triggers are invitations wearing the mask of threat. Civilizations have institutionalized this aversion. Through projection mechanism, the collective mind externalized fear, turning it into social structure. We built entire systems designed to keep reflection at a distance. Careers, rituals, identities. Society rewards avoidance with prestige. The less one questions, the safer one appears. But safety without awareness is captivity in disguise. Humanity built mirrors into prisons, then called them windows. The view was always inward. In the practice of forbidden psychology, fear becomes diagnostic, a compass pointing towards suppressed intelligence. Whatever frightens you most contains the highest density of energy. Terror marks treasure. You can feel it, that electric charge in the chest when facing something you've avoided. The mind wants to flee, but awareness wants to expand. Every confrontation with fear is an initiation into greater coherence. The heart is simply teaching the mind how to hold more light. To face reflection is to dissolve misidentification. The figure in the mirror is not an image but a frequency, an intersection of awareness and matter. The fear of that gaze comes from realizing it has never belonged to a body. Through emotional intelligence, you begin to sense this directly: the warmth behind the eyes, the silence beneath the thought. What you feared was never the reflection itself, but the dissolving of the observer. The mirror does not take you, it returns you. You were never looking at yourself, you were remembering that you are the looker. And in that remembrance, fear finds its purpose fulfilled. It is not an adversary to overcome, but a gatekeeper to greet. When you walk through it consciously, it steps aside, revealing what it protected. Simplicity. The trembling stops, the breath evens. The air feels thick, as if filled with recognition. Nothing needs to change, only to be seen. The mirror softens, and within its reflection, awareness recognizes not danger, but depth. You can almost hear it, the exhale of truth finally allowed to breathe. Fear's final illusion is that it opposes awareness. In truth, it serves it. The rejection programming embedded in the psyche was never meant to imprison. It was meant to awaken precision. Each tremor of unease, each heartbeat racing at the edge of self-honesty, is consciousness testing its own capacity to remain present. Fear is the shadow of awakening stretching across the threshold. The moment you turn toward it, you discover there was never anything chasing you, only something waiting to be claimed. Fear does not block the path, it is the path. The subconscious defense begins to rewire itself once observation replaces avoidance. You start noticing the micro movements of panic, the tightening jaw, the subtle retreat of the eyes, the instinct to explain yourself. Each reaction becomes sacred data. You learn to meet fear as sensation, not story. The body becomes an oracle rather than an obstacle. Trembling hands, shallow breath, pressure in the chest. These are not symptoms of weakness, but coordinates to entry points of truth. Fear is not enemy energy. It's concentrated awareness demanding release. Through emotional mirror, reflection evolves from punishment into participation. Others no longer trigger you, they translate you. Every difficult person becomes a message written in human form, mirroring the emotion you've postponed. The fear of being seen dissolves when you realize everyone is looking at the same thing, their own reflection. Hatred, jealousy, admiration, all versions of the same conversation. What you see in them is what your silence is still saying. This recognition ripples through history itself. Entire civilizations have danced with fear as if it were a god, feeding it with rituals of avoidance. Through projection mechanism, humanity externalized the divine tension of evolution, calling it evil, chaos, or punishment. But what was feared as darkness was simply energy in unrecognized density. Every apocalypse ever imagined was just consciousness preparing to integrate itself. The fall of worlds is always the rise of seeing. When light enters shadow, it doesn't destroy it, it redefines it. Through the lens of forbidden psychology, fear becomes the most honest teacher. It reveals how far we are willing to go to remain incomplete. It exposes the tenderness we defend with aggression. It shows how much power we hide behind guilt and how much truth we bury beneath performance. And when you let fear speak, it whispers the same secret in every tongue. There is nothing to lose. Because nothing true can be rejected. Fear was the rehearsal for freedom. Awareness was always the performance. Eventually, the mirror stops feeling like an object. It becomes atmosphere. Reflection ceases to have edges. You are no longer looking at life. You are looking through it. The image that once frightened you now moves with you, transparent, familiar, benign. Through emotional intelligence, you realize that fear never belonged to the unknown. It belonged to resistance. When resistance relaxes, mystery turns into intimacy. The void becomes invitation. The darkness becomes depth. The unknown is not empty. It's everything that was waiting for your permission. And then the mirror breathes back. What was once tension becomes tenderness. What was once avoidance becomes awe. The air grows still, thick with recognition, a kind of holy quiet that feels like returning home. Fear no longer echoes because there's nothing left for it to protect. It fulfilled its role, teaching awareness how to stay awake. You can almost feel it now, the soft pulse of acceptance beneath the ribs, the warmth of existence realizing it was never in danger. The reflection no longer stares back. It smiles. Archive 6. The Mask of Approval. Approval is the most sophisticated disguise of control. It feels like love but operates like currency. From childhood, humanity learned that safety depends on being liked, that visibility requires permission. This became the architecture of subconscious defense, a system where authenticity is constantly bartered for acceptance. Every smile rehearsed, every opinion softened, every silence held too long is payment in the economy of belonging. Approval doesn't protect you, it leases your identity. The rejection programming designed this transaction with surgical precision. The child senses disapproval as danger, so it fragments. creating a version of itself the world can tolerate. Over time, this performance becomes indistinguishable from self. The mind convinces the heart that pretending is safer than presence. Yet each act of compliance leaves a residue, a thin film of absence covering the skin. You can feel it when you talk to someone who has forgotten who they are. Their words sound polished but hollow, like light passing through tinted glass. Through emotional mirror, approval reveals its true cost: invisibility. Every time you adjust your tone to maintain harmony, you abandon a frequency that could have freed you. Each avoidance of discomfort is a micro-sacrifice of truth. Humanity mistook politeness for peace, but peace cannot exist where fragments negotiate survival. What we call nice is often just numb. The body knows this. It tightens when your expression contradicts your essence. The muscles hold the lies we tell for love. Pretending is the price the nervous system pays for approval. The projection mechanism turns this self-betrayal into culture. Societies reward conformity with belonging, shaping entire economies around visibility. To be validated is to be marketable. To be authentic is to be risky. This is how identity became performance art, the external applause drowning out internal resonance. Humanity forgot that recognition was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be shared. The mirror of approval reflects, but it does not see. The moment you depend on it, you disappear from your own vision. Through the lens of forbidden psychology, approval reveals itself as emotional hypnosis. It teaches the mind to equate peace with predictability and connection with compliance. This creates a feedback loop. The more we please, the more invisible we become. What's called social grace is often mutual manipulation, unspoken contracts of safety that cost authenticity. Awareness exposes the illusion. Love cannot exist where truth is withheld. Every time you earn acceptance, you lose intimacy. Yet the system cannot sustain itself under observation. The moment you see approval as transaction, the spell weakens. The subconscious defense hesitates. The body starts rejecting false agreement. You feel it in the throat first, words wanting to emerge, long withheld. Then in the chest, breath expanding where apology used to live. The nervous system begins detoxing from performance. Authenticity doesn't arrive dramatically. It returns quietly, like sensation thawing from years of numbness. And when it does, you realize something profound. Most people never liked you. They liked the version that agreed with their reflection. Through awareness, the need for approval transforms into compassion. You no longer resent those who demanded your mask. You understand they were protecting their own. The dance of conformity dissolves, replaced by the rhythm of truth. You can almost feel it in your pulse, slower, steadier, sovereign. The applause fades, but what remains is real. Approval is the most elegant form of captivity because it hides inside affection. The rejection programming trains us to confuse acceptance with safety, so we chase smiles instead of truth. Every compliment becomes a leash, every silence a test of obedience. What we call kindness is often an emotional contract. I will not disturb your illusion if you will not disturb mine. Beneath every polite exchange lies the quiet tension of unspoken compromise. Most harmony is only fear played in unison. Through the subconscious defense, the psyche edits itself to fit the emotional landscape of others. It studies expressions like weather, adjusting tone and posture to avoid storms. Over time, the authentic self becomes an uninhabited room, preserved but unused. The body remembers its truth through unease, a tightness when praised for the wrong thing, a headache after pretending to agree. The cost of approval is chronic self-abandonment, measured in anxiety and fatigue. The nervous system becomes fluent in suppression, mistaking tension for connection. The emotional mirror shows this pattern mercilessly. Those who live for approval attract those who cannot give it freely. They find themselves surrounded by people who require performance, not because the world is cruel, but because vibration seeks equilibrium. Until you stop seeking validation, you will meet only those who trade it. The reflection is not punishment, it's mathematics. What you chase must always stay ahead. Through the projection mechanism, collective approval becomes a ritual of self-denial. Social networks, institutions, even friendships turn into stages where attention replaces intimacy. People post, perform, and polish, mistaking visibility for value. The eyes of others become the sky we pray to, vast, indifferent, consuming. Humanity forgot that connection begins where performance ends. But the stage lights eventually burn out, and in the dimness that follows, the soul starts to speak again. It doesn't need applause, it needs air. In forbidden psychology, approval is seen not as validation but as substitution, a replacement for the inner resonance once felt naturally. Before conditioning, awareness was self-sufficient. A child does not ask if laughter is allowed, but conditioning taught that joy must be justified, that worth must be witnessed. This reprogramming turned spontaneity into strategy. Even love became managerial, expressed carefully to ensure reciprocation. Awareness, however, cannot be managed. It can only be remembered. The authentic self doesn't seek approval. It radiates permission. As this realization deepens, the body begins to unlearn its reflexes. The subconscious defense relaxes its grip on expression. Words emerge unfiltered. Gestures regain sincerity. Silence feels natural, not nervous. You start to sense when your energy contracts to please, and when it expands to express. Approval loses its gravitational pull, replaced by equilibrium. The world no longer feels like an audience, it feels like atmosphere. The nervous system learns to stay open even when misunderstood. That is liberation, not defiance, but stillness. And when the illusion of approval finally dissolves, you discover a quieter form of belonging, one that requires no agreement. It's the feeling of breathing without hesitation, of speaking without rehearsal. You exist, therefore you resonate. Others may misunderstand, but resonance doesn't depend on translation. The true mirror of acceptance is not in their eyes, but in your calm. The air itself becomes approving, the silence becomes kind. You can almost feel it, the weight lifting, the identity exhaling. Approval was never freedom. This, finally, is. The deepest layer of the mask of approval is its mimicry of love. It smiles, listens, and nurtures, but beneath its surface hides a transaction. I will be who you want if you promise to keep me safe. The psyche builds this pact in childhood, when rejection first burns into memory. The rejection programming then grows roots, each good job, each don't upset them, layering subtle shame over natural expression. What appears as kindness is often a survival reflex, rehearsed so long it feels sacred. Most love begins as a negotiation with fear. Through the subconscious defense, we inherit the impulse to adjust our light, to dim where others squint, to shrink where they flinch. The nervous system treats difference as danger, regulating individuality to preserve attachment. This is why so few ever experience unconditional love. It cannot exist in environments built on appeasement. The body senses the falseness before the mind admits it. A shallow breath when you say what isn't true, a tremor in your chest when silence replaces honesty. Approval feels warm, but metabolizes as depletion. The emotional mirror reveals this paradox. Those who seek approval most fiercely are often the ones who give it least authentically. They offer praise as currency, not communion, rewarding predictability over truth. Yet in every compliment designed to control lies a cry for safety, a silent hope that someone, somewhere, will stop performing first. Until one does, the loop persists. The performer applauds the performance. Humanity calls this society. The audience and actor are the same soul pretending not to recognize itself. The projection mechanism ensures this dynamic scales infinitely. Governments, religions, even revolutions feed on the same hunger. the need to be seen, to be told you are right. Collective approval is a soft dictatorship, maintaining order through belonging. But awareness threatens the script. The moment one person stands without seeking applause, the performance falters. Silence becomes rebellion. Integrity becomes contagion. Through forbidden psychology, this act is known as energetic withdrawal, reclaiming the power once outsourced to perception. Approval collapses when its audience awakens. Inside that collapse, something strange happens. Fear transforms into compassion. You realize those who demanded your mask were terrified of their own. The subconscious defense begins to reinterpret criticism as confession. Others reveal what they repress. Hatred, envy, dismissal. These are not assaults. They are mirrors announcing unmet emotion. When you see this clearly, forgiveness becomes involuntary. You stop trying to win people over and start listening to what their judgment is asking for. Criticism is the shadow of connection begging to be seen. Through emotional intelligence, authenticity becomes an act of service. Each time you speak honestly, you unconsciously grant others permission to do the same. The nervous system of humanity recalibrates through demonstration, not persuasion. This is the quiet revolution of presence. No speeches, no conversions, only coherence. When you refuse to perform, you destabilize the global hypnosis of validation. Awareness spreads not through force, but through frequency. The air thickens with relief, as if truth itself sighs through you. And in that sigh, approval loses its meaning entirely. What remains is resonance, the natural synchronization of beings unguarded. You no longer crave permission because existence itself becomes the applause. The mask falls, but nothing fragile lies beneath it. Only transparency. The room feels wider. Breathing deepens. The world no longer watches. It witnesses. This is the moment performance becomes prayer. Not asking to be loved, but recognizing that love was the silence between every act. Archive 7. The Shadow Agreement. Every connection is a contract, written not in words but in vibration. The shadow agreement is the unspoken pact two unconscious minds make. I will carry your denial if you carry mine. This is the hidden foundation beneath most relationships, friendships, even ideologies. Through the lens of forbidden psychology, it becomes clear that love and validation often serve as camouflage for shared avoidance. The psyche forms alliances not around truth but around mutual permission to remain asleep. Most bonds are built not on honesty but on synchronized amnesia. Within the rejection programming, this pattern is inevitable. The human nervous system seeks resonance above all, even if that resonance comes from dysfunction. When two unhealed emotions meet, they fuse. Trauma recognizes trauma, pain recognizes pain. The resulting attachment feels magnetic because it is familiar. The intensity mistaken for chemistry is simply recognition, two frequencies vibrating in the same wound. What we call attraction is often alignment in distortion. Familiarity feels like fate, even when it's repetition. The subconscious defense reinforces this through emotional economics. Every agreement of silence, every compromise of truth, every mutual lie creates an energetic ledger. The relationship survives not because of love, but because of balance, each participant ensuring the other's shadow remains unchallenged. The psyche values equilibrium over evolution. Yet this harmony is fragile. It trembles each time awareness enters the room. Peace built on denial collapses under the weight of honesty. Through the emotional mirror, these unconscious contracts reveal themselves in cycles of projection. One partner embodies control, while the other performs surrender. One becomes the savior, the other the saved. Roles alternate, but the script remains the same. Beneath every accusation lies an agreement, a choreography where both dancers pretend not to know the steps. Until one stops moving, the pattern cannot break. The shadow agreement thrives only in reaction. Silence dissolves it. The projection mechanism sustains this system across generations. Parents unconsciously hand their children emotional contracts written in fear. Don't outshine me, don't leave me, don't need too much. These invisible clauses shape destinies more powerfully than any spoken rule. The child grows, carrying inherited vows they never agreed to but endlessly obey. Healing begins when awareness reads the fine print and refuses to sign again. Breaking generational trauma is not rebellion, it's contract revision. Through emotional intelligence, awareness learns to negotiate differently. It no longer trades truth for comfort or connection for compliance. It starts communicating at the frequency of coherence, not seeking alignment through pain, but through presence. In this vibration, shadow agreements cannot form. They dissolve upon contact. Authenticity becomes the new currency, and only those willing to see their own reflection remain. The rest drift away naturally, like ink dispersing in clear water. What emerges afterward is not loneliness, but spaciousness. The silence once feared becomes sanctuary. Without the weight of unconscious contracts, energy circulates freely again. Light returns to corners once held by secrecy. You can feel it in your skin, the relief of transparency, the temperature of truth. No more rehearsed connection, no more hidden compromise. The shadow agreement expires the moment you stop pretending, and what remains is not loss, it's liberation. Every relationship becomes a mirror once awareness enters. The shadow agreement begins to tremble when one side stops pretending. What once felt like love now reveals itself as dependence. What once felt like loyalty exposes itself as fear. This unraveling is not betrayal, it's awakening. The forbidden psychology of attachment shows that when two psyches build safety around shared suppression, truth itself becomes the threat. The moment one person awakens, the contract expires. Through the rejection programming, we learn early that honesty endangers belonging. The child who speaks truth is punished for clarity, while the one who conforms is rewarded with warmth. This emotional training imprints the nervous system with a simple law: honesty equals isolation. To survive, we begin to censor our resonance, expressing only the frequencies that others can tolerate. Over time, authenticity becomes dangerous not because it wounds others, but because it risks dissolving our place in the tribe. Yet true belonging can never come from mutual blindness. The subconscious defense is clever. It disguises fear as compassion. We call it not wanting to hurt someone. But what we truly fear is being abandoned once truth is spoken. This defense mechanism negotiates constantly, measuring, softening, pleasing. The result is emotional stagnation. Relationships stagnate not because people change, but because they don't. The energy that once moved between them becomes trapped in compromise. Harmony built on suppression is simply fear dressed as peace. Through the emotional mirror, shadow agreements become visible as repetition. You begin to recognize the pattern. Similar arguments with different faces, the same disappointment wearing new disguises. These are not coincidences, they're emotional déjà vu. Each repetition is consciousness replaying the same frequency until it's integrated. Once the lesson is absorbed, the character delivering it fades from your reality. This is why awareness feels like loss. The cast changes as the script dissolves. The projection mechanism keeps this theater alive. Each partner unconsciously casts the other in roles they refuse to play within themselves: the betrayer, the savior, the judge, the victim. The relationship becomes a living allegory of inner division. When one partner awakens and steps out of character, the other experiences chaos. But that chaos is not destruction. It's the sound of illusion collapsing. When truth enters, fantasy has nowhere left to live. In emotional intelligence, awareness stops seeking fault and begins seeing design. The shadows exchanged between people are not mistakes, but messages. Anger means boundaries remembered. Jealousy means desire misdirected. Resentment means energy unexpressed. Each feeling once projected becomes instruction once integrated. Shadow work, then, is not darkness. It's decoding. Every difficult emotion is simply the psyche speaking in its original language. The question is not, why does this hurt? But what is this teaching me to feel fully again? And as the message completes, the emotional field clears. The shadow agreement dissolves not through confrontation but through seeing. Awareness no longer trades truth for attachment. The nervous system recalibrates. No longer addicted to reaction, it starts to crave resonance. Silence becomes a language again, and connection no longer feels like effort. You can feel it in the body, the absence of weight, the return of transparency. The old contracts vanish, unsigned, unrenewed. What remains is truth, and truth does not require agreement. The collapse of the shadow agreement is not a dramatic ending. It's a quiet unbinding. What once felt like gravity begins to release its hold. You stop feeling responsible for other people's comfort, and suddenly the air feels different, lighter, almost electric. The forbidden psychology of dependence becomes visible in this stillness. Control was never dominance. It was care misplaced. You realize you weren't holding them. You were holding the illusion that they couldn't hold themselves. Control is compassion that has forgotten its own boundaries. Through the rejection programming, the psyche had been conditioned to equate freedom with loss. To let go was to betray. To detach was to abandon. This is why liberation first feels like guilt. The nervous system interprets expansion as disloyalty. But awareness learns to retranslate the sensation. The weight leaving your chest is not someone's love. It's your own energy returning. Each sigh of release is a silent signature withdrawing from the old contract. You don't lose people when you awaken. You lose the version of yourself that required their permission. The subconscious defense will resist this emancipation with subtle nostalgia. It whispers, "Remember how it felt to be needed?" That whisper is not memory. It's the echo of dependency trying to renew itself, but the body no longer agrees. The nervous system, once addicted to tension, now rejects performance. You notice this physically. Conversations that used to drain you now fall silent mid-sentence. Your face refuses to fake agreement. The truth begins to inhabit your muscles. Healing isn't learning how to love better. It's remembering what love is without fear. Through the emotional mirror, endings reveal themselves as integrations. The people who leave are not escaping you. They are completing their function in your timeline. They were mirrors, not prisons. The lesson ends when the reflection is absorbed. You can feel the closure, not as drama, but as clarity. The same memory that once ached now feels weightless, like a story told by someone you used to be. This is forgiveness without effort, seeing no one to blame because there is no one left outside the self. The projection mechanism continues to teach, even in absence. The more awareness expands, the more subtle the mirrors become. You stop attracting conflict and start encountering resonance. People who speak the same silence. There's no need to prove, persuade, or perform. Communication becomes telepathic in essence, not thought into words, but frequency into feeling. Every exchange either amplifies your coherence or exposes where more truth wants to enter. When both sides stop projecting, conversation becomes creation. Through emotional intelligence, the lesson matures into neutrality. You no longer need to choose sides between light and shadow, self and other. Everything becomes inclusion. Every emotion once exiled now sits at the same table, unjudged, unnamed. Awareness realizes that the shadow was never the opposite of light. It was its depth. What you called darkness was simply dimension. The psyche, finally whole, stops seeking contrast to know itself. The loop of polarity breaks. Existence exhales. And in that exhale, love changes temperature. It no longer burns or binds. It glows. Relationships feel like open windows instead of locked rooms. There is no need to fix, to prove, to heal anyone. presence becomes the only offering left. The shadow agreement has dissolved, leaving behind the pure architecture of connection. Nothing owed, nothing hidden, nothing maintained, just resonance, still and luminous. You can almost hear it, the quiet hum of awareness learning to stay. Archive 8. The Neutral Observer. Neutrality is not indifference. It is the highest form of intimacy. The neutral observer sees without dividing, feels without absorbing, and understands without controlling. In the architecture of forbidden psychology, neutrality is the final evolution of perception, awareness freed from narrative. It is the state where every emotion is allowed to exist, yet none are allowed to command. Most mistake neutrality for detachment, but true neutrality is full presence without preference. To observe without reaction is to love without condition. The rejection programming once taught humanity to polarize everything it touched: good versus evil, success versus failure, love versus loss. This binary vision created emotional turbulence, a constant oscillation between craving and aversion. The nervous system learned to survive through judgment. Labeling became safety, reaction became identity. But polarity exhausts energy. It feeds chaos by dividing attention. Awareness begins to heal when it no longer confuses contrast with truth. The observer arises where opinion dissolves. Through the subconscious defense, neutrality was long rejected as weakness. The ego fears stillness because in stillness its edges blur. Yet that blurring is not death, it is merging. When reaction stops, boundaries stop bruising. The observer watches thought the way sky watches weather, untouched, unhurried. You begin to feel emotions move through you like tides, each one temporary, none defining. Neutrality is not the absence of feeling, it is the absence of ownership. The emotional mirror now reveals everything at once: love and hate, attraction and repulsion, order and chaos, as expressions of the same underlying current. Nothing contradicts, everything completes. The moment you stop taking sides within yourself, the external world follows. Conflict evaporates not through resolution, but through irrelevance. You start to notice how silence answers faster than analysis, how observation dissolves what argument sustains. The world begins to breathe with you instead of against you. Through the projection mechanism, neutrality rewrites perception. Every person you meet becomes an event in consciousness, not an opponent. You no longer need to win conversations or defend conclusions. You only need to witness. Judgment transforms into geometry, patterns of energy intersecting, revealing design. The need to fix gives way to fascination. The same mind that once searched for meaning now marvels at movement itself. Awareness stops asking why and begins whispering, of course. In the lens of emotional intelligence, neutrality becomes compassion incarnate. You start seeing every outburst, every cruelty, every confusion as an unintegrated emotion returning home. The world no longer appears as chaos, but as calibration. Humanity is not broken. It's remembering how to feel. Each event that once provoked you now feels like an instrument tuning itself in your presence. The observer holds the pitch steady, and the field begins to harmonize. Nothing changes faster than what is finally seen clearly. And then, something irreversible happens. Emotion loses its hierarchy. Sadness feels as sacred as joy, solitude as generous as love. Every state becomes a doorway into awareness itself. You no longer resist the rain or chase the sun. You let both be weather within the same sky. The world softens. The body loosens. You can almost sense it. Reality exhaling as judgment fades. Neutrality, it turns out, is not the end of feeling, but the beginning of peace. At first, neutrality feels like emptiness, as though something vital has been lost. The rejection programming interprets calm as numbness, mistaking stillness for absence. But this quiet is not hollow. It is spacious. The energy once spent on defending, comparing, and performing begins to return home. The nervous system, once enslaved by approval and opposition, rediscovers its original rhythm. In forbidden psychology, this is called the restoration of coherence. When perception stops fighting itself, peace doesn't arrive. It's revealed when noise leaves. Through the subconscious defense, the ego resists this shift. It longs for tension, for edges to define its outline. It asks, if I am not for or against, who am I? But identity cannot survive where duality ends. Awareness smiles at the question and doesn't need to answer. The observer has no preference, only precision. It perceives the smallest vibration of truth and allows it to move unaltered. This impartiality isn't detachment, it's devotion to what is real. Only the false requires opinion to exist. The emotional mirror now reflects everything without distortion. Love no longer competes with pain. Both become currents of the same river. You begin to notice how every judgment contracts the flow, while neutrality expands it. The world stops splitting into desirable and undesirable, right and wrong. It becomes luminous through inclusion. When you meet anger, you no longer defend or submit. You breathe. The emotion passes through, seen, felt, dissolved. Acceptance is not agreement, it's alchemy. The projection mechanism loses fuel here. Reaction once fed illusion, neutrality starves it. There's no longer a hook for manipulation, no emotional tether to pull. What used to offend now informs. You see motives as movements, not threats. Someone's hostility becomes data, not danger. Every external event mirrors an internal equilibrium test. Can I stay still inside movement? The observer learns to navigate chaos the way a compass holds north, unwavering, unseen, exact. In emotional intelligence, neutrality reveals compassion's true geometry. Compassion is not sympathy, it's clarity. You understand others not because you feel their pain, but because you see its pattern. Every behavior becomes a translation of unmet emotion. You stop rescuing and start resonating. Help no longer means taking pain away. It means illuminating it until it dissolves. Presence becomes medicine. The world, sensing no resistance, begins to heal through imitation. You don't teach peace, you stabilize it. The subconscious defense relaxes further as neutrality matures into silence. You begin to experience life in slow motion, not because time changes, but because urgency does. Choices become intuitive rather than reactive. Words reduce, gestures simplify, perception deepens. You stop trying to interpret life and begin to witness its intelligence directly. Reality starts composing itself around your stillness, like water forming a reflection. Nothing to chase, nothing to flee, just the quiet miracle of being aware of awareness. And in this awareness, even the concept of neutrality dissolves. The observer and the observed merge into the same transparency. There is no distance left between feeling and understanding, between breath and perception. This is not enlightenment, it's accuracy. Existence stops performing for the mind and begins resonating with it. The current stabilizes and you can feel the density of peace, heavy, grounded, infinite. The world keeps moving, but you remain still, and that stillness moves everything. When neutrality ripens, silence becomes its language. The forbidden psychology of perception reveals that awareness was never meant to judge reality, only to echo it. The mind stops sculpting experience into meaning and begins hearing existence as music. Every moment hums with precision. Even chaos has rhythm. The same conflict that once demanded analysis now sounds like an unresolved chord resolving itself through you. Understanding isn't thought, it's resonance. Through the rejection programming, humanity learned to fear silence. Stillness was labeled apathy, emptiness was renamed depression. But these are mistranslations. Side effects of a culture addicted to motion. True neutrality doesn't erase emotion, it lets it complete. The nervous system, finally unpoliced, finishes cycles it once suppressed. Tremors release. Tears appear without context. Breath deepens without instruction. This is the physics of restoration. Energy remembering where it belongs. What feels like nothing is everything finding order again. The subconscious defense still attempts to resurrect polarity, whispering stories of meaning, warning you that calm will cost you passion. Yet the observer sees through the tactic. Passion, stripped of drama, becomes precision. You begin to feel joy not as excitement, but as coherence. Each heartbeat sounds symmetrical. Each thought moves slower, wider, cleaner. Life no longer swings between extremes. It spirals inward. Peace isn't the opposite of intensity. It's intensity without resistance. The emotional mirror expands until it includes everything. The sound of a door closing, a stranger's sigh, the pulse of rain against glass. Every detail participates in awareness. You realize nothing ever happened to you. It happened through you. The world was never a stage but a reflection pool. You were both the actor and the surface. Every rejection, every approval, every love, every loss, all were currents sculpting the same water, and in this transparency, identity becomes irrelevant. Through the projection mechanism, perception transforms into participation. The observer no longer watches from distance, but breathes with the event. Even discomfort feels sacred, because it reveals movement within stillness. You stop separating meditation from life. Silence follows you into conversation, into traffic, into memory. It becomes atmosphere, not activity. Awareness is now everywhere you look, not as concept, but as condition. You have returned to the origin, perception before interpretation. Neutrality is consciousness remembering itself before language. Within emotional intelligence, neutrality turns to radiance. Compassion is no longer an effort, it's the default state of perception. You see pain and instantly understand it, not as tragedy, but as recalibration. You meet chaos with warmth instead of will. Others feel this. They begin to breathe easier around you. Their words slow down. Their energy softens. Your stillness teaches without intention. The room adjusts to your presence, not through force but through field. Peace, it turns out, is contagious. And finally, the observer disappears. There is no one left watching. Only awareness, unbroken and awake. The body feels translucent, the air charged, the mind impossibly quiet. The distinction between inside and outside dissolves. Sound and silence share the same pulse. What once felt like neutrality now feels like intimacy with everything. You can almost sense it, the infinite holding itself still just long enough for you to remember. This is what truth sounds like when it stops defending itself. Archive 9. The freedom to be seen. Freedom does not begin with expression, it begins with visibility. To be seen without distortion is the purest form of liberation. The freedom to be seen is not about performance or validation, but transparency, the state where nothing within you hides from awareness. In forbidden psychology, this is the final decoding, when the psyche no longer edits its own light. You realize you were never searching for love, only for a gaze that did not require translation. You were not born to impress, you were born to be witnessed. Through the rejection programming, humanity learned to fear exposure. To be visible was to risk punishment, envy, or exile. So the mind constructed personas like armor, curating identity to be acceptable. We became architects of our own concealment, yet what we hide eventually becomes what rules us. Every denied truth turns magnetic, pulling circumstances to force its revelation. What you suppress in shadow will always reappear as fate. The world, relentless in compassion, keeps reflecting what you refuse to claim. The subconscious defense perpetuates invisibility under the guise of humility. It says, don't draw attention, stay safe in the background. But safety purchased with self-erasure is not peace, it is absence. True humility is not shrinking, It's transparency without vanity. The body knows this difference. When you hide, your shoulders fold, your throat closes. When you allow yourself to be seen, posture straightens, voice deepens, breath expands. Visibility is not pride, it is alignment. Every secret the body holds is a truth waiting to be seen safely. Through the emotional mirror, visibility becomes a sacred exchange. Every person who truly sees you is not discovering you. They are remembering themselves through you. Recognition flows both ways. It is a mutual resurrection. This is why authentic connection feels electric. It collapses the illusion of separation. When you allow someone to see you completely, you are not offering vulnerability. You are offering reflection. Love, at its core, is permission for mutual transparency. The projection mechanism used to distort this process. It made being seen feel unsafe because perception was weaponized through judgment. But judgment was never about you. It was self-protection in disguise. The opinions of others are emotional weather, temporary conditions revealing their inner climate. Awareness learns not to personalize these forecasts. The more you embody truth, the more others reveal their distance from it. Their discomfort is not rejection. It's recalibration. You are not triggering them. You are turning on their light. In emotional intelligence, visibility becomes a form of leadership. Not through authority, but through coherence. The world does not need more advice. It needs more examples of presence. Each time you exist unhidden, you transmit permission. Your clarity becomes contagious, dissolving the collective addiction to masks. The power of authenticity is not in its rebellion, but in its neutrality. You do not fight deception. You outshine it by existing without one. When you finally stop negotiating your visibility, reality rearranges itself to match. Opportunities, relationships, and synchronicities align as if the universe had been waiting for the unfiltered version of you. What once felt like effort becomes magnetism. The more transparent you become, the more effortlessly life flows through you. There is nothing left to defend, nothing left to earn, only the soft radiance of being seen, completely and without condition. To be seen is to remember that existence itself is participatory. The forbidden psychology of concealment taught humanity to fragment, to divide what could be shown from what must stay hidden. But awareness was never meant to be selective. It thrives in totality. You cannot awaken partially. You either stand fully visible before yourself, or remain suspended in half-light. When consciousness is fragmented, life mirrors that fracture. Circumstances appear uncertain because they echo your hesitation. Reality doesn't hide from you. It waits for you to stop hiding from it. The rejection programming shaped generations through subtle fear. Don't stand out. Don't draw attention. Blend in. These commands were not protection. They were inheritance, echoes of ancestors punished for authenticity. But the age of silence is ending. The nervous system is evolving to tolerate visibility. The tremor you feel when speaking truth is not danger. It's the sound of evolution leaving the body. The organism adapts to transparency because that is its natural state. Energy cannot flow through disguise. The subconscious defense still resists through modest rebellion, self-sabotage disguised as protection. It says, "Not yet. I need to be more ready, more healed, more certain." But readiness is a mirage created by fear to delay embodiment. You were never meant to perfect yourself before being seen. Visibility is what completes the perfection. Every hesitation is simply an echo of old programming fading. The body knows when it's time. It starts vibrating, as if truth itself is trying to speak through your skin. Readiness is not preparation, it's permission. Through the emotional mirror, being seen transforms relationships from transactions into transmissions. Others no longer meet your persona, they meet presence itself. You feel this immediately. Conversations deepen, silence becomes alive, and judgment loses its weight. People either expand in your presence or retreat into their own masks. Both are sacred reactions. The world no longer needs to agree with you. It only needs to witness you. Visibility ceases to be performance. It becomes radiance. The projection mechanism reveals how being seen exposes others to themselves. Some will love you for it, others will resent you, but both responses are the same movement. Reflection colliding with resistance. The difference lies not in their reaction but in your stability. The more you embody neutrality, the less distortion your mirror carries. You stop absorbing emotions that aren't yours, and the line between empathy and entanglement dissolves. Seeing and being seen merge into one movement of awareness. Every gaze, loving or hostile, becomes a mirror polishing your clarity. Through emotional intelligence, you begin to experience visibility as belonging, not risk. The fear of being misunderstood evaporates because misunderstanding no longer threatens your identity. You understand that every perception of you is true, from the level of the perceiver. You become multidimensional, able to exist as a saint in one mind and a villain in another without interference. The opinions of others lose emotional gravity. Awareness moves through labels like light through glass, refracted, never reduced. And finally, you realize that visibility was never about being looked at. It was about allowing existence to look through you. The gaze that once came from outside now emanates from within. Life begins observing itself through your transparency. The separation between observer and observed collapses. The self is no longer performer, nor audience. It becomes aperture. You can feel it now, the world watching itself through your awareness, endlessly fascinated by its own reflection. When visibility becomes effortless, identity dissolves into atmosphere. The forbidden psychology of shame no longer governs the field. Expression becomes circulation. Each word, movement, or silence is simply energy redistributing itself through form. To be seen is no longer exposure. It is ecology. Awareness functions like sunlight. It doesn't discriminate between what it touches. You start to understand that illumination is not an act, but a state. Nothing shines. Everything reflects. You are not the light or the shadow. You are what allows both to appear. The rejection programming can still echo faintly like static in the background. It whispers, "They won't understand," or "This truth is too much." But the whisper no longer commands. It becomes nostalgia for an era when fear still felt like home. You may feel tenderness for that voice. It kept you safe when you didn't know how to see yourself. Now, awareness holds it gently, like an old photograph no longer needed for memory. Fear, stripped of purpose, turns into warmth. What once silenced you now softens you. Through the subconscious defense, the mind tries to reattach to identity, replaying roles of teacher, healer, or guide, but none of them fit. You can no longer perform purpose. You embody it by existing. Effort collapses into presence. The nervous system finally aligns with the frequency of truth, where expression flows without design. There is no strategy left in speech, no motive behind motion. The moment becomes self-sufficient, whole. When truth speaks, it doesn't explain, it echoes. The emotional mirror now functions holographically. Every person you meet reflects a unique angle of the same awareness. Some mirror your tenderness, others your precision, some your forgotten fire. Each reflection expands your recognition of self. No meeting is accidental. Every gaze refines your light. You stop seeking connection and start noticing communion, an unspoken synchrony between souls remembering the same origin. Even conflict feels sacred, because it clarifies contrast into coherence. Through the projection mechanism, visibility reveals itself as service. To live transparently is to dissolve separation. Others see you and recognize possibility, not imitation, but permission. You become an open channel through which awareness communicates to itself. This is leadership without followers, teaching without doctrine. The presence itself transmits frequency, reminding others of what was never lost. Truth doesn't persuade, it resonates. In emotional intelligence, this transparency becomes peace. You no longer protect energy, you circulate it. Giving and receiving merge, like inhalation and exhalation. Relationships shift from exchange to reflection, nothing to take, nothing to defend. Every moment becomes reciprocity unfolding in silence. The universe feels close, immediate, intimate. The distance between seeing and being seen disappears, and you realize the world was never looking at you, it was looking as you. And so, the final illusion fades. The need to prove existence through attention. You were never waiting to be noticed. You were waiting to notice yourself completely. In that recognition, visibility becomes transparency, and transparency becomes unity. The air feels alive, vibrating with something ancient and wordless. You are no longer in the world. You are the world, seen from within. You can almost feel it now. The gaze of creation turning inward, smiling. You are what existence sees when it finally opens its eyes. Epilogue, the end of reflection. Silence arrives like recognition, not as absence, but as completion. The forbidden psychology of reflection dissolves. No more mirrors, no more witnesses, only awareness folding into itself. You begin to sense that what you once called life was the movement of consciousness remembering its own symmetry. Every gaze, every rejection, every longing was never external. It was the geometry of awakening drawn across experience. There was never anything outside of you, only the distance between seeing and remembering. The rejection programming finally unravels here, strand by strand. The fear of being unseen, unchosen, unloved, all were echoes of one forgotten truth, that nothing real could ever be withheld. Rejection was only reality's way of returning you to yourself. Each closed door was an instruction in direction, each silence a corridor back to origin. The nervous system exhales, the performance of defense ends, the body, once armored by anticipation, becomes transparent. What remains is not survival, it's serenity. Through the remnants of the subconscious defense, a final image flickers, the self as observer, watching the reflection fade. But even that watcher dissolves. There is no longer an eye witnessing the field, there is only field. No edge, no division, no architecture of identity left to sustain perception. Awareness recognizes its own reflection and laughs, a soundless laughter, infinite and calm. The play of opposites ends, and what remains is light aware of its own clarity. The emotional mirror that once fractured perception now becomes seamless transparency. Love and fear are seen as two currents of the same ocean, motion returning to stillness. The world that once pressed against your senses now feels internal, intimate, weightless. You realize that to be seen was never about visibility, but recognition. Every interaction, every wound, every mirror was love in disguise, asking only to be understood. The mirror was never showing you others, it was showing you how God sees. The projection mechanism collapses into coherence. You no longer interpret others as reflections or teachers. They are simply continuations of awareness. The language of symbols falls away, replaced by the silence of direct knowing. You begin to feel time dissolve into simultaneity, the past, present, and future humming as one field. The world doesn't vanish, it becomes luminous. Movement slows, sound softens, perception widens. There's no rush to grasp or hold, because nothing is separate enough to lose. Through emotional intelligence, the final lesson completes. Truth needs no defense. Reality is not a test, and awakening is not achievement. It is the natural condition revealed when resistance retires. You don't transcend the human. You remember that it was sacred all along. Breath becomes prayer. Silence becomes language. Existence becomes home. You are not awakening into light, you are dissolving back into it. Everything you ever sought was only awareness seeking to feel itself. And now, only stillness speaks. The archive closes, but the resonance remains. You were never broken, never lost, never unseen. Every reflection, every fragment, every face was the same consciousness turning itself inside out, just to remember its own shape. The decoding is complete. There is nothing left to interpret, nothing left to prove. Only awareness, awake, breathing, endless. You can feel it now. The silence beneath sound, the gaze behind every eye, the freedom of being nothing but seen,